All right. So I'm Stanley Anderson II. I'm the analyst for this project, and I worked under Kelly Whitaker this semester. And the institution we worked with, or the firm we worked with, was called Peculiar Pigs Farm, and it's owned by Marvin Ross, who does a lot of the work. In the background, you can see it's a little bit washed out. You can see the front entrance of the farm. To your left, immediately, you have the barn where the baby pigs were just born. And there are a lot of things that are developing that I like. And you can see the logo. You'll be able to see the logo in the bottom right-hand corner, but it's great branding. So he has all those things taken care of. I just came in to help him with some operational issues, and I refer to it as everything being under one roof. So one of the things that people take for granted about roofs is that they don't just keep the outside from going in. They also are one of the principal ways you keep what you already have inside from going out. So the things that we're concerned about going out of the business naturally are the finances, the money. We want to make sure that the things that we have stay in there. And with the two projects that I worked on for Marvin, a meat processing plant and a biodiesel production unit, we're able to keep a lot of the cash flow that he has from pig sales inside of his business. And it's going to be such a significant amount is that it's not only going to be a strong basis for financing, whether the loans come through USDA or any other source, but it's also going to be a firm cash fund that we'll be able to use for continued and future investment. So I'm just going to introduce a little bit of the problem. I think I've did enough of that right now. Then we'll go into a little bit of background about what he does before I talk about each unit separately, and then some conclusions and recommendations for the invigoration of peculiar pigs. Okay, mouse wheel doesn't want to work today. That's fine. Excuse me. Now, the value chain is it's an economic concept that I added some biological components to it, and everything for my understanding in the biological sense, it all comes from the sun, and from that you get your capital goods that humans are able to pull out of the earth directly, and then you have more industrial goods that are used to help make consumer goods. So if we just follow this chain up, we see that you have things that are much more in a raw form that eventually come out to things that we would actually buy in a store. The click isn't working either, but we'll be all right. So the capital goods is actually the section that Marvin works in. Peculiar Pig Farms is in the agriculture section naturally. So that causes your margins to actually be very thin. There are a lot of reasons why food is cheaper than sometimes I think it should be, but ultimately the fact that it is such a base level good, it means that there are a lot of things that need to be done to it, which means that more of the money is tilted more towards the consumer and industrial side rather than going straight to the farmer. And that's just the situation we have, but we're going to adapt our strategy based on that. And that's why we're more focused on retaining cash flow, because there isn't a lot we can do to increase the product in that sense, since it's such a raw base level product. So now the farm system works this way. We'll start off with the swine diet, top left. They eat a lot of things. Sometimes it's things that people wouldn't eat. Currently, they're working on a diet of bread and milk, but that is something that Marvin is actively working to change, giving them more access to different vegetables. They produce waste, and that waste can be used as a fertilizer. And this is where the garden system that Peculiar Pigs is starting up, again, it comes into play. Pig slurry is a very good fertilizer, so it's going to supply those plants with everything that they need, and that's going to start growing the food. And then Peculiar Pigs is already looking to switch from this bread and milk diet to one that's based in vegetables, so that they can keep everything in house. There'll no longer be something leaking out from having to go get these waste food products. Now, zooming out a little bit, we're going into the overall pork system. So if Peculiar Pig is already doing a great job in this section where the swines are grown on farms, they're able to eat the food that's native at their plant, the next step will be to attack the meat processing, because this is an area where there's food leaking out. Eventually, there could be an option to take place of a retail food establishment, But at this time, it's very, very important to conquer the meat processing sector. So that way the pigs can be grown and sold to a retailer all within house. No longer is there going to be a very significant, mind you, cash flow coming out of the business for that. In addition to the meat processing plant, I'm trying to move. Never mind, you guys will be able to see it. Um, the video's in the bottom right hand corner over the logo and stuff. But all right. So meat processing is one of the things that is a huge area of leakage. Currently, their peculiar pig is spending 2,000 to 3,000 a month processing alone. If that number is increased, Marvin, just let me. You can feel free to let me know during the section break. But it is a very significant amount of money as well as a significant amount of time. During the site visit, Marvin invited me to actually join him at the processor just so I could see that side of the process. But I found out it was an additional 3 hours just in driving alone in order to get that done. That's valuable time that could be spent doing a lot of other things, including making your own energy on site. But we'll talk about that later. Fuel is also another exit for cash flow. Gas apparently, at least in my area, jumped up another 10 cents. So I know diesel is going to be right behind it. If there's a way to kind of address this issue of money pouring out because of fuel, that's going to be something else that needs to be looked into. There was a concern about the soil running off into potential waterways, but after looking at the property and allowing some greenery to grow in that area, this doesn't appear to be a problem for a peculiar pig anymore. So that's checked off. We're good. We're finished with that one. But the other two, we're going to proceed with those projects to examine what can be done to address those issues. Did I freeze? Okay. Now, a meat processor really just needs to have certain components to it. This is an example of a meat processor that was designed for a Kenyan goat meat processor. So it has all of the essential elements that you need. We can spend a lot more time going through it, but effectively, how this design, I ended up favoring this design just because how separate I guess the non-producing space is from the producing space. So animals come in on this side, they're prodded, bled out, skinned, slaughtered, and divided up into different sectors. You can put them in the freezer immediately here. There's this place for inspection. All of these components exist. And then separately, you have all the areas where people can use the bathroom, have look at reports and things like that. And this processor is very amenable to a lot of different designs. And the one that was discussed within our conversations, Marvin and I, was the use of a refrigerator truck. You can see the outside, and this is a picture of a similar design from the inside. It has the capability of cooling itself down. It's very well insulated, and as long as there's power supplying this unit, it's going to be held at a temperature that is acceptable for meat to be processed. Now, in terms of trying to get it to be double wide, that could be something that could be a little bit more difficult. But if one were to just use this as the slaughter space, hang up a rack of some sort so that the different meats can be hanged and bled out, you would be able to do a few animals within this space and have a pretty good job doing it. But if you put two of them side by side, then you could open up a lot more space, as long as you have an appropriate siding. Similar to how beer or soda delivery trucks, they come in refrigerated cars, but there's doors on the side. If you can connect those doors on the side, you'll be able to make a very similar design to what you see here. Just imagine that you bisect this, and you can imagine that there's two different trucks side by side, and that's going to make the entirety of the slaughterhouse there. Now, the most challenging part about all of this is the amount of regulations that are concerned. So in the final report that I'm giving to Marvin and Peculiar Pig, there's a summary, just a quick summary of all of the relevant laws and how to find them, just so that there's a general understanding of how these different entities function and how they regulate everything. At the center of it all is the USDA. Naturally, agriculture determines all this. But then second to that is DHEC, which is the Department of Health and Environmental Control in South Carolina. And of course, they are enforcing the laws passed by the state of South Carolina, as well as anything that Congress passes. For environmental concerns, it goes directly to DHEC, as well as them receiving some information from the EPA. So all these groups are making sure that the food is safe and sound. The big things are making sure that the animal is slaughtered humanely. That's from the USDA. And then DHEC establishes rules for what can be sold to a retail establishment like a supermarket or a restaurant. But on the outside of all this, we have traditional practices. So while they are not regulated by law, they're kind of hinted at, looking at all of the different chapter laws that were passed by Congress. They're hinted at, but it's generally understood that people know how to slaughter the animal, and they just need to make sure that certain temperatures are adhered to, that there is not a lot of blood in the animal, things like that. But a lot of that can be covered with traditional practices, and as long as there is the knowledge out there, Peculiar Pig can take advantage of that and find those people who know those things, and leverage that information to help them with their meat processor. So now, second section, we're in the biodiesel study. Now, but before I jump in, are there any questions? No, I've been going for a little bit. We're good? All right, awesome. So our fuel production issue, it relates to petrol diesel. It's an external cost for energy for the company. It is an industrial good, so thinking back to our previous example, so it isn't something that's raw, it's something that's been processed once already, but it's sold in order to do other things. And the other things we needed to do is transport the pigs to the slaughterhouse, transport things that are at the slaughterhouse from there to the farm or the various retailers. And again, as we hope we get the meat processor in place, we'll just be transporting them to the various people we sell to. So there's been a lot of talk nationally about transitioning to biodiesel. I'm here to tell you, here to break the bad news, that is impossible. But in certain circumstances, we can find that it is advantageous to switch to a biofuel, particularly in a rural environment where you can't reach the quantities needed for an industrial scale, and where you are not concerned about being a fuel wholesaler but a primary fuel user. You don't have to worry about your margin times your production costs. You don't have to worry about that and compare that to the price of petrol diesel. That isn't a concern for you. I can say with a high degree of confidence, you can produce your own fuel that is roughly equivalent to diesel for less than $1 a gallon. So for personal use, we don't need this alpha in this equation where we're trying to maximize a profit just based on being able to sell it to someone else. We don't have to worry about that. As long as we are producing a fuel that we're using that's less than petrol diesel, we're getting ahead, and we can get very, very far ahead at the level that we're working with. Now, the USDA does have a biofuels producer program, and it funds farmers who produce their own energy. It isn't for a commercialized level of production, so the magic number is less than 10,000 gallons a year. And any bioenergy solution is funded as long as it is known about and as long as it's feasible. So they don't restrict it to just say biodiesel, bioethanol. You can do a whole host of other things. But the reasons why we're going through with biodiesel are threefold, and we each have a different sphere to represent them. At the center of it all, we have some strong partnerships at Peculiar Pig. From current vendors, the oil is free. They just need to dispose of their waste vegetable oil somehow, and selling it to a biodiesel producer is the easiest way to do that. The second ring is that it's going to be privately used fuel, so it does not need to, well, it does need to adhere to ASTM standards for biodiesel, but it doesn't need to be, as there's no liability issues with it. It's going to be used for a vehicle that Peculiar Pig owns. And as far as I can tell from the research, Department of Transportation is concerned about emissions, not primarily the type of fuel you use. So if you pass emissions, you're in the clear. There just does not seem to be that you have to use this fuel. They just recommend it's ASTM standard, which it will be when we produce it correctly, and that it just has to run on a current vehicle that is actually owned by Peculiar Pig or one that can be purchased. That's really the mainline advantage of biodiesel. Now, there are two competing devices that will produce at the level that Peculiar Pig wants to extract at. And the one on the left is the Springboard Biodiesel, and the one on the right is U.S. Freedom Fuels. I had the pleasure to speak to U.S. Freedom Fuels owner a few weekends ago, and I was able to see that this is by far the better option. Just not close, although there are some advantages that come with this one. But I'm sure once we look at the prices, I think that will cause the fine dividing line. Now, of course, it wouldn't be proper vetting if we didn't look at the other options that we had. One could construct a custom system, but it's going to require even more time. And without a record of expertise, it could be harder to get USDA funding. USDA seeing these finished devices, this is going to make them a lot happier. Because essentially, if it does end up not doing what it's supposed to do, there's some confidence that you'll be able to handle that through litigation. So it's a safer bet for getting funding. And then you have outsourced production. Again, at this level, it would be a waste of time to even consider that. To transport 40 gallons of waste vegetable oil to a producer. Mind you, there are no producers there's about 2 producers in South Carolina. They're very small scale, but I have seen scant evidence that they're still in operation. My advisor knows a few of them personally, but I don't see that they're still producing. Now, this is projected budgets for each of the systems that I examined. So Springboard Biodiesel has a solution that comes with a dry wash solution, as in it doesn't need water to clear out the impurities from the biodiesel. Otherwise, you do need to use water. And from the reactor prices themselves, they're pretty similar. They also need to be crated, and there's also a shipping cost that I don't think I put into this table, but just keep that in mind, about an additional $1,000 each for shipping. But this is the price for just the reactor. So yes, U.S. Freedom Fuels is cheaper. And I go in the next slide, we'll see what we're really paying for in terms of volume. So it is a cheaper solution, but it comes with a dry wash column built in. So really, what we're looking at is the U.S. Freedom Fuel having not only the reactor, but it also has the post-processing step that you have to pay an additional markup for. So when everything is included, it comes out to about $23,000. This number doesn't scare me, Marvin. I hope it doesn't worry you either. Based on the budget that we talked about previously, this is a pretty decent target, but it does put us almost at our limit in terms of current funding. Whereas if we do the U.S. Freedom Fuel, we have the dry wash already, but we also use the methanol recovery system. Methanol is something that we won't have a problem with because we can get it from a local distiller. But if we wanted to maintain the supply, there's an additional $6,200 cost to get a methanol recovery system. So that ended up coming to about $16,000. Not bad, very, very good. I think that that's a great solution as well. But if we want to ignore methanol recovery, and wait for a later date before we invest in something like this, that's also an option as well. So for about $12,000, you're getting the equivalent of this $23,000 Springboard biodiesel. Now, the advantage with Springboard is that effectively you're taking a piece of paper and you're just putting in the things that the paper tells you to do. With U.S. Freedom Fuels, you do have to look at a few more bells and whistles to make sure that you're actually reacting this in the correct way. It comes with a test kit, which is very nice. Comes with gloves and things like that, but again, those are disposable. Eventually, you have to replace them yourself. But it comes with some things that you can use to test the fuel for quality before you react it, so you know how much catalyst and other things to add. So in the operational cost, I include all that information here. Waste vegetable oil is again free. Methanol is also going to be assumed to be free. And I also added $500 additional for the springboard system to account for the fact that there's going to be some tools that you need to actually test your fuel. I believe they sell the kit, and the kit does fall below this margin, but it's just $500 is going to be the assumed cost. Now, to operational costs do not include labor or anything like that, but that's something that we would think about in the future. But if we get the right package and use one of the cheaper options, I'm sure that'll be something that